Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday where we come here and conversate every Sunday again at 2 p.m. Today is the last of our health series. We are finishing this 3-week series off with a discussion on mental health and wellness. And we are joined by a panelist that you may have seen last week if you tuned in. So without further ado, my name is Jada Curry. For those who are new here, I'm the Director of Programs at both sides of the conversation. And the lovely panelists that we have today, you see them every Sunday. You already know we have the co-founders. So go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Rico Hamilton, co-founder of both sides of the conversation.
And I'm John Henry, co-founder of both sides of the conversation.
All right. And then you will meet our panelists again. If you were here last Sunday, this will be a reintroduction. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, James?
Sure. My name is James Harrison. I'm a licensed clinical social worker practicing here in Oakland, California.
All right. And before we get into this conversation, we always want to remind you all, especially for those who are new here, of our conversational, sorry, I'm receiving something, our standards as we talk. So again, we get into many different topics here, but we always want to remain respectful of one another. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it to John so he can remind us all of how we are supposed to interact with each other while we're in this space together.
Yes, thank you. We have our standard. We know we have a lot of new members joining both sides of the conversation. We are providing an honest, safe space for this conversation. Please be respectful of that. Please be respectful of all the panelists, hosts, and participants. We are here to have a healthy debate, conversation, whatever you want to view it as. Please don't personalize anything with anyone. No name calling, no bullying, no trolling, shaming. None of that will be allowed, not even in the group. You know, your perspective is yours. It's not a prescription, but your perspective should be respected. You don't have to agree, but you should still show respect. So that's our standards for being part of this group.
And we also want to remind you to go ahead and share this video, start a watch party if you want. We want as many people to be included in this conversation as possible. And just to know, for those who are tuning in, or if you don't already know, we do have some upcoming opportunities as our mentor program is kicking off. So if that is something that you're interested in, being a mentor as well, or if you know a child who you would like to put into this program, you can always reach us at both sides of the conversation at gmail.com. And you will actually see some new videos coming for the upgrades in our program as we expand. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rico so he can go ahead and tell us a little bit more about this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Jada. Last week we had an amazing conversation around health in the Black community as it relates to physical health and eating properly. And James gave us some amazing information on how your physical health and what you eat and how your mental health and how they all kind of combine together create wellness and how an individual can actually live well. Towards the end of our conversation last week, we started a pretty good conversation around mental health and some ways that we can get the community involved more in mental health, because in the Black community, as it relates to a lot of issues that go on in our community, we ask the question, what type of support the Black community need? What are some ways that we can support the Black community? And number one is always wellness, always mental health, always healing. And John brought a good point up last week, which was a lot of African Americans, when they do go to college, there's a huge number of individuals who do get psychologist or psychiatrist degrees. And he was wondering, why is that in the Black community still needs those type of services? So I think that I would like to start the question off. Wait, before I start that question off, I see Corey. I'll make him a panelist, and then I'll turn Corey into a co-host. So Corey, if you can hear me, you can turn on your mic and your video.
Hey Rico.
Hey, how you doing, Corey? So
Good, brother.
It's nice seeing you. I'm happy you came on. I don't know how much time you have, but I mean, I'm just happy that you're here. Can you introduce yourself, Corey, and just let folks know who you are?
Sure. My name is O'Corey Clark. I actually work with San Francisco Unified School District. In my role, I am a social worker, but I provide services for equity, equity engagement, conflict resolution, and staff development.
All right, cool. So I've been knowing Corey for like a long time. We actually ran a young men's group together. And in that young men's group, Corey brought a different way of teaching from what I viewed. He was teaching young Black men on their history. He was teaching them how to change the paradigm, like giving them different perspectives on life. And I love the class even myself. I was a student up in there. So, you know, I was like, I seen him and I think that things happen for a reason. I'm happy that I did see him because Corey, he definitely brings a different view to things that is, in my opinion, the right view. So I definitely want to start the question off with, you know, in our community, we do have a lot of scholars, and a lot of those scholars do get degrees to become social workers, to become therapists, to become healers in the community. With the high number of individuals that's in our community that get those degrees, why is it so hard for our community to heal? And maybe, John, did you want to start off with that question and maybe just your thoughts on what you think the reason why we have those huge numbers and there's a huge disconnect as it relates to mental health?
Yeah, I think, I mean, some of it would definitely is tied to stigma. You know, anytime we talk about in the Black community, you know, dealing with personal family issues or, you know, dealing with the community issues, we have this process that we're taught to like hold everything in, keep it to ourselves, no talking about it. And I think that's part of it. But I'm still baffled. I know a lot of people who have those degrees, and I always ask, you know, with as many people that are going into sociology, psychology, and psychiatry, you know, why is it a big gap between the education for the community and dealing with mental health and dealing with the traumas and the things that we deal with in our community? And I never really get a true answer on it. And I know some people gave feedback. People don't like to go back to get their hours or continue or finish or whatever it is. But I just think that it's something that we really need to focus on. I'm glad yesterday was Mental Health Awareness Day. And I'm glad to see the brothers and the sisters on here because I think it takes a whole community to open up that dialogue to make people feel comfortable with having a conversation. And we can't just put mental health with crazy, or we can't put it as a negative thing. And I think the more that we see more Black and brown community members seeking, advocating, and participating in mental health, I think it's better for the community to move on. And maybe we could get more of our young people, we could get more of our educational systems, you know, involved with this mental health process. And how do we implement it into the schooling, into our families, so that it's a normal conversation that's happening all the time.
Well, John, I think well, Corey, I think I'm gonna go to you first because I think that with the group that you ran, it was therapeutic teaching. I mean, I don't know what, like, how to frame it. But to me, it was a therapeutic environment and a therapeutic way of teaching, because when I was in there and I'm listening to you speak and you talk about all these different things that a lot of young folks and a lot of people that was in the room wasn't aware of, it was actually healing. The more that you learned about yourself, the more you learned about history, and in the way that it empowered some of those young people, to me, I think that it really opened my eyes and it was actually a healing space. So what do you, in terms of the question, I guess I asked the question around, you know, Black therapists and a lot of people going out for those degrees and why it's a disconnect. But then at the end, John just asked the same question, sort of, that was asking, how do we create those type of healing spaces for the community where the stigma is gone?
Well, let me just address that stigma. So that stigma is a transgenerational stigma. associated with being identified as having emotional issues, having psychiatric issues in family dynamics. Historically, you know, like most people of color across the board, we never wanted to be perceived as having a psychiatric issue. That's a shadow on families. It didn't matter if you were Black, it didn't matter if you were Chinese, it didn't matter if you were Latino, it didn't matter who it was. The idea of going to a psychiatrist or being part of a mental health stigma or a mental health program or any mental health experience was always looked at as not good, and it would bring a dark shadow on the family. So the idea is that in terms of Black families and other families as well, people of color, they would say that we keep our business in the family. So some of the people that are listening may even be able to connect with that, knowing that we only allow what's happening in our family to stay in our family. We don't take what's happening in our family and take it outside. Well, those kind of old models no longer serve us to these days, because we become aware that we are dealing with a system called white supremacy or racism, white supremacy, and that is a system of domination, of global domination that's structured for the institution of race, and that's the institution of whiteness. So how do we as people of color begin to step over those boundaries? Well, the more we talk about it, the more we introduce it, the more we normalize the experience. That's how we begin to do it. We take the stigma off through language. We take the stigma off through having conversations about the impact of being able to unpack some of your life experiences, some of the stressors. What will it be able to do for you? How will it be able to help you? How will it be able to heal you? Having those conversations, making those things more available in the community, to introduce to young people, to introduce to families, to ask them just to give it a try, to see if it will work for them. It has a lot to do with trust, trusting a system that's identified really as a white system. Trusting that system is difficult for some people, especially people of color, because of the stigma that's been associated to it. Did I explain that pretty good?
Yeah, I think that was beautiful. I think that was beautifully put, and I definitely have to agree with you. We have to institute it in the families, and we have to make it a comfortable conversation, because if we don't, we see what's going on with our young people, and you know,
right.
putting up the
Right.
the flag so we can identify it as well. You know, because I think a lot of the healing can happen, like you said, through communication. And I also believe that a lot of people, when we deal with the medical professions, they worried about the prescription pushers, right? Sometimes the trauma and the stuff that's being dealt with in the Black community, we just really need to have a conversation to get it off our chest. But because of the Western medicine,
Right.
there seems to be a high tendency to push drugs. And then that sometimes
Right.
causes other effects that you know is really damaging to the community. So I think that's the alignment of the conversation, you know, because when we talk about psychiatric, we talk about mental health, there's one part of the communication and the healing and identifying, and then we have the medicine side, that's the prescription. Oh, if you're feeling down, we need to give you pills for depression. Or maybe you're hearing things, and maybe it's not so much we hearing things, but we'll give you a psychiatric pill. So I think,
Right.
you know, that's the balance. How do we disassociate the chemical from the mental in the conversation?
Well, you know, not every mental health interaction is about medication. Sometimes those mental health interactions can just be about conversation, can just be about unpacking your life experience. Now, true enough, some people do have psychiatric issues that require medication. Some do, but not everybody. The majority of our families don't necessarily need to have medication, but the medication might be given to help them with their anxiety, to help them reduce their stress. But there are other tools that people can use to help reduce stress, besides using alcohol, besides using drugs, besides being hypersexual. There are other tools. One of the fantastic tools that I find that help people very much is about breath work, actually learning how to breathe, just learning things about your anatomy and the physiology of your body and the function of your body and how your body can begin to heal itself or begin to manage itself just through breathing. Learning how to be mindful. A lot of people look at mindfulness as a form of meditation. Well, it is a form of meditation, but it's also just a form of noticing what's happening inside the body when you come into a stressful situation, noticing what is happening with your breathing, noticing what your triggers are, noticing the feelings that manifest as a result of the triggers, and noticing the emotions that manifest. And once you're able to become conscious of self, conscious of your own experiences, it helps you to regulate that. So it doesn't always require medication. Medication is a fast way of dealing with things, but if you really want to get to know yourself, get to understand yourself a little bit better, and get to understand that you are the cause, 90% of the time, we are the cause of all of our discomfort and all of our dysfunction based on our perception of experience, how we perceive the interaction based on the value systems that we have. So when we begin to understand those things and we begin to be able to unpack those things, we can heal ourselves without medication.
So James, I want to pose the same question to you, and I want to get a little feedback from you as well, and some of your thoughts on the conversation that we just was talking about.
Yeah. I agree with everything that Brother Corey was saying. I think that with the generational patterns that we see have been happening in our communities, specifically what it looks like for us to be able to have conversations with each other about what we're experiencing, that even is sometimes in many ways parallel. Like you talk about parallel processes and whatnot. I think that just to speak to his point about even the impact of white domination in some way, or just white ways of thinking, or how whiteness has impacted the way that we are able to communicate with each other. I think that because of that system, like a lot of our families, a lot of our communities have been siloed in a way. You know, think about this, the thought of not wanting to share with somebody else because there's a fear of us looking less than, or a fear of us not being able to. I guess one of the things that I think about is somebody being able to say that I made it. You know, somebody able to say that I was able to be successful. But if I had this stigma attached to me that I had some real hardship or some real difficulty, it's vulnerable for folks, and in a way it's kind of shameful for some people to say, you know, I have these difficulties that in some ways, in lots of ways, actually contribute to me being here, right? But to say that with other folks can really seem like it's again, I go back to it feeling shameful. So I think that being able to have those conversations across families, you know, is really important to say, hey, you know, when we saw this issue, we saw this concern come up, here's some of the things that we did, either that did work or that didn't work. And if we're sharing that in between families, the likelihood that we're going to be able to put our heads together to share relevant information is going to be, I think there's going to be a much more successful outcome. But if we're trying to deal with everything on our own, and we just keep it inside the family, we're limiting our resources by just saying, well, we're just going to talk about it right here in our family. Nobody else needs to know. Well, I mean, it's not to say that it can't be effective in some places, but I think that being able to share that with other families, with the communities, with some professionals, can allow for there to be a little bit more insight, or at least a little bit more, again, I would go back to saying that just having more resources available for us to do that. There was something else that Corey said that stood out to me, and I think just you all talking about medication and the role of medication, it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? I mean, in the same way that I think last week we were talking about how food, I say you can use food as medicine, right? It doesn't always have to be, you know, a pill, what have you. Just looking at what we put into our bodies has a significant impact on the way that we're able to respond to what's happening around us. So seeing the medication as it could be a temporary thing, in the same way as that when we use aspirin or what have you to get rid of headaches. And it's like, you got to stop doing what you were doing to get the headache in the first place, so you don't have to take the aspirin to continue, right? If I'm beating my head up against the wall while I'm constantly around noise, well, can I do some things environmentally or socially to be able to stop these symptoms from happening, right? If I want to stop this headache from going on, can I get to the root cause of what's happening? And how do we have those conversations with folks to say, hey, Like when we're experiencing these traumas in some way, what's creating that trauma for us? Are we able to have those conversations about, you know, what about our environments is creating more trauma? Well, how is that? How has it existed generationally? Right? If I'm doing the same thing, I'm interacting with the same thing that my grandparents were, my parents were, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's important to say, like, you know what, this thing has been constant. What happens if we remove, you know, the abuse? What happens if we remove the shouting, we remove the violent conversations that have been happening? What is our family going to look like when we start to make some shifts in the way that we behave or interact with one another, right? Or even who we allow in some ways to interact with us, right? I think that those are important conversations to be able to have inside the family, but also within the community.
Absolutely.
So I have a couple of questions. I think you hit on something really good there, James. And I want to ask you and Corey. I got kind of like 3 questions, but I posted a video in our group about mental health, and I really want to get this from you guys. And they were talking about there's a difference in mental health for Black males or for Black folks and white folks, right? If we're looking at the concept of mental health, right? And I understand that as Black people, we went through more trauma than other races. Is there really that much of a difference in the mental health process of Blacks and whites, or is that just theory speaking?
You want to jump on that, Corey? You want me to?
well, I'll take that on a little bit. I'm going to say, from my perspective, this is just from my perspective, that the conditions that we face may be different, and the way in which we respond to those conditions may be different. But the effect and the response to traumatic exposure is going to be the same. It's going to have the same physiological responses. That means what it will do to the body and what it will do to the mind. Our coping mechanisms may be different based on your level of exposure, based on your resources, based on the community that you come from, based on what's normalized as a coping mechanism. However, depending on what the traumatic issue is and how often you are assaulted with that traumatic issue, that can be the key factor. Being assaulted enough with traumatic events can definitely cause anybody to fall down. How we get up, that's a whole different story. We have a number of different experiences as Black men that impact our lives daily, right, in different ways. Some things we can identify with. We can identify with how the impact of white supremacy racism has impacted us over the course of years. We can identify how the effect of Black on Black crime impacts us over the course of years. We can identify how the effect of white supremacy racism affects us as men, and how the effect of white supremacy racism impacts women, Black women, over the course of years, and the impact that has on us as couples being able to manage relationships. So those things all play a big role. So your question is it the same? Well, the influence, whatever starts it, the cause of the stress may be different, but human beings respond to stress in a particular way that's similar.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Corey is sharing, in that, like, there's definitely some overlap, right? And the way that you're talking about human body experiences stress, or human body experiences even stimulation, right? And even in that, there's a spectrum, right? And I think that on a level of addressing Black men specifically, if we're talking about white men, I think that there's a humanization or a dehumanization that also needs to be talked about, right? Because we're not in these moments, especially now, but I think even way before now, like we're still not seen as human beings, right? And the way that we're going to interact with a therapeutic environment is going to be much different culturally and socially than white bodies. I think that people of color, the way that we experience trauma, and that how it's kind of, not even kind of, how it is part of our biology at this point. We're something that's being passed down generationally, as we were saying before. And the way that white folks are experiencing is not going to be nowhere near the same, because they haven't been dehumanized in the way that we've been dehumanized. But that's not in their, and I don't want to say it's in their DNA, right? But it's not something that's being passed down to them in the way that's being passed down to us, and at the rate that it is. It's not to say that at some point in their history and their genealogy that they haven't experienced some of that, right? But the way that we, as African folks and as indigenous folks, have experienced that is not it's not by any means the same. However, there is some overlap in some of the, I want to say initial techniques, but some of the techniques that get used to be able to address the traumas that we experience, right? I think that the way that we are able to soothe ourselves, the way that we are able to see ourselves, even the way that Corey was saying, that just being able to identify what we're feeling when we're feeling it, being able to talk about how we breathe and all that kind of stuff. Those are the places where we can start to connect, and some of the, I think the treatment options can be similar in that way. But when it comes down to, in my mind, what we're going to be addressing when we're in the room for Black bodies and white bodies is going to be a little bit different, or a lot different.
Right. Yeah, that was good feedback. So the second thing that I wanted to ask James, because you brought this up about nutrition and diet, and Carrie, you're working with youth. So how much is our nutrition, the food that the people in the underserved communities and our ghettos, how much is the food that we're eating is causing the intentional depression, anxiety, paranoia? Because I'm working with a lot of young people. I work in the juvenile hall, and a lot of these young people are paranoid, right? It's a high paranoia. And I understand part of it is because we, in the community, the kids use the designer drugs, or they actually use the psychiatric drugs to get high on, right? When I started like really looking into these designer drugs that these rappers and these people are talking about, a lot of them are antidepressants. A lot of them are kind of psychotic pills in a sense, right? So how much, I guess my question is, how much is the food that we're eating, from the fast food to the junk food to the processed food, how much is that actually causing some of our mental health issues in our communities?
Tremendous effect. So just to frame it, food is now has been weaponized. Food is weaponized to be able to, excuse me for 1 second. Here. Food is weaponized to be able to respond to us biologically. The fast food, the chips, the drinks, the sugar, all those things have a traumatic impact on our physiology. I definitely try in my family to make sure that we can have as much healthy food as possible, as much fruits and vegetables, as much organic food as possible. Staying out of restaurants as much as we can, especially fast food restaurants. Those things have a tremendous effect on your psychiatric well-being.
I echo that for sure with what Corey is saying. I think that the weaponization of food, but also just thinking about, we're thinking about what our body needs to function, right? And what is in, I say, natural foods, so whole foods, and what's in the processed foods. If the processed foods, like what their content for nutrients and what the body actually needs to function and to thrive, is pretty much zero. When you think about what's in the fast food, when you think about what's in a lot of these genetically modified products, like when you think about the actual nutrients, you're talking about vitamins, minerals, those kind of things that are in the foods, there's absolutely nothing in there for us to thrive on. And what happens to the body when it gets starved of those things, it starts to deteriorate. Like it starts to try to figure out other ways to function. And you can look at ourselves and say, well, if I'm starving myself, I'm going to kind of pull from whatever I need, what I think is available to me in order to try to survive, right? And I think that that's the mind's way in some manners to be able to try to figure out, trying to find some semblance of balance, is to say, well, I'm just going to act out. I'm going to do something different, and it's going to look somewhat chaotic, and often chaotic when the body's not getting what it needs, when the mind's not getting what it needs.
Right. It's just even with the tap water, even with the water that we drink, those things can be dangerous. Just knowing what's in your water, knowing what's in your fruit juice, knowing what's in your regular drinks that you buy from the store, knowing what's in your food, knowing what you're eating is so important. Your body is the largest computer that you could ever think of. And it has the capacity to recognize every chemical known to man that is placed inside your body. And some of those things are very detrimental to your well-being and to your emotional as well as your physical health.
So like a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing both of you say is solution based. Between a lot of stuff that I'm hearing you guys talk about, I hear a lot of solutions within it. How do we get those solutions down to the ground, to the community? Because in the community in which I work in, is a lot of it is nonprofit. A lot of it, I do run into folks who is more private sector also. But a lot of funding is going towards mental health, and that's just what it is. And for some reason, the services aren't being provided in the community, or they have these services and people are just not going. Like, do you guys have any strategic ways that we can possibly get this information out to the community, and some of these solutions on how we get folks involved? How do we get it to them?
Yeah, I think that what you're doing right now is a great platform to get these conversations moving. I also believe that just coming into the school district, having conversations with students, partnering with San Francisco Unified with their APAC, which is the Black Family Alliance, letting them know that these conversations are taking place, letting them know that they have access to support services. There are some Black families that would really, really like to partner with other Black therapists. There are not a lot of Black therapists in San Francisco. However, there is a chapter, Bay Area Black Social Workers Association, that can partner with San Francisco Unified. There are a number of different licensed clinical social workers that are available to support students and their families in any of the stressors or struggles that they might be having. Another way to get things out is just by word of mouth, just passing it on, normalizing the experience of participating in counseling, normalizing the experience of participating in men's groups, men's circles, women's groups, women's circles, letting that be something that that we create normality to. It becomes, a sense of normacy to just participate in a men's group, just to sit down and talk. What does it mean to be a man, right? Like I saw James in the men's forum that they had on a Zoom, and I thought that was incredible. I sat there and watched it with my son, his mother, my daughter. We sat there. It was great questions. It was a great forum. It opens the door for people to think about, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? What kind of things do men struggle with? Women have the same questions. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be in a relationship with a man, right? Those things. What things are difficult? What things am I struggling with? These are all questions that everybody has. If we think about it, we all have those questions. What things am I struggling with? Why do I have these issues? Why is it her fault? Why is it not my fault? Why am I going through these things? Normalizing those conversations, just letting people know that having these conversations is okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. Jada, if you could look in the group chat, we get some questions in. Jessica said, introducing impactful personal growth workshops that focus on triggers and showing visuals. I think she's right. Like, especially for men, men need to see other men talking. And I'm glad you brought that up about fatherhood, manhood, because what does that look like? We have a community of single mothers raising our young men, and what does a man really look like? And then we have men who come home from prison or come in the community and they came from a single family and they don't know how to be men. So yeah, I think that's powerful. Like, how do we start that man group where another man can see a man that it's okay to be emotional, to cry, be vulnerable, or to say it's okay. Like, I think that's deep.
I just want to say, just let me add this one thing. When we think about masculinity and when we think about femininity, especially in the Black community, that we don't really know what it is to be a man without the influence of white supremacy culture, because we've never seen what a man looks like without the influence of white supremacy culture. So being able to define what we say is masculinity and what we say is okay within masculinity, that's so important, because each one of us as young men, we were always looking for that man. We wanted to be able to define our manhood, our masculinity, our power, right? But it's so intertwined with what white supremacy has said, that men don't cry, that men aren't sensitive. If men cry and if men are sensitive, they're carrying on feminine characteristics, which is totally not true, right? Not true at all, because men are human beings and we have feelings and we hurt, and we want to be able to speak about those things in a safe environment, right? Because we do have feelings. Women have feelings. Unfortunately, during slavery, Black women were treated as equal to men. So therefore, they have been identified as having these masculine characteristics. It's not necessarily true. That's how we've been cultured to be. So we have to unpack those things and let people know that let men and women know that it's okay for women to embrace divine femininity. It's okay for men to embrace aspects of being empathetic and having empathy for another human being, to be soft and gentle, to be caring and kind. Right? It's okay. So we really have to unpack those things in terms of how we demonstrate our masculinity to men, and how women demonstrate their femininity to men and women.
That was a amazing way to to put it, Corey. Because can you tell folks where they can actually find some information on that? Because like I know, like me personally, a lot of our history is steered in white supremacy, right? When we look at everything, it is based on the patriotic principles of white supremacy, period, right?
Right.
It's hard to find things that are more steered towards the indigenous principles that we can actually find that says there's two energies that each person is made up of, right? One is the feminine energy and the masculine energy, and they both coexist together, right?
They coexist together, yes.
So how, like, where can people actually find that information? Because it's hard to find it if like you gotta be like really looking, because a lot of their information in terms of what you're saying is hidden, and you gotta have somebody like yourself, and I know James know them jewels. Can you drop some jewels on us where, you know, the people out there who's watching can go and look into the books, you know, where indigenous practices, you know, it tells the total opposite of what white supremacy tells us?
James, you want to take that on?
I'll make an effort to. I think that if I'm being honest, the literature that outlines it, I haven't come across it in a way that's in volumes, right? I feel like I've been having to piece together myself in ways where it's kind of, I'm getting a little bit from here, I'm getting a little bit from there. I'm sitting down with elders, I'm sitting down with different spiritual traditions to be able to talk about, have those kinds of conversations. There's a book, and I can't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head, but it does talk about the masculine energy, feminine energy, talking about compassion, talking about being able to understand or to have some sense of balance. But I think that if anywhere, right, if I was talking about balance and what that looks like, especially inside of some of the Kemetic traditions, I think that being able to look at some of the, what's it called, the Medu Neter, is being able to look at those types of books to be able to, I mean, and some of that is, I want to say it's more complex, but depending on how much of the literature you're getting into, it doesn't break it down and say, well, this is what masculine energy looks like, this is what feminine energy looks like. And we think about how Africans have communicated and how we as Black folks communicate in general, like it's done through storytelling. So you start to see different characters, you start to see different deities, you start to see different personalities that start to emulate some of these traits, and we get to look at them and say, so what does it look like for the wind? What kind of if I was to use the natural elements for a moment, what kind of energy, what kind of energy comes from these natural elements, talking about the wind or the earth or the water or any of those kinds of things, right? To be able to say, like, how does that flow in the world? Like, how are these balancing each other, right? And I think that people who we can deal with zodiacs, and I'm kind of getting off track here a little bit, but even looking at what that's like for those entities, for those energies to interact with one another, right? So I would like to be able to take some time to be able to create a book list, for example, to be able to say, hey,
Right.
like this, we can actually find more information on this in a way that's going to be healthy. But there's also this piece of, like, you get to, in the same way that Corey is saying, you get to define that, we get to define that for ourselves. And I can define masculinity one way, you all can define masculinity one way, femininity, et cetera, but what does that mean for us functioning in a healthy community, right? So I'd be happy to try to compile a list. I'm sure that I got lots of books around here. I'm sure it's sneaking out, sitting on one of my shelves here. But there's a few books that kind of come to mind. But I'd be happy to share some of those with you in the chat or in the Facebook post.
Likewise, I like how you put that. I would have to piecemeal. I had to piecemeal things together in order for me to come up with some of the understandings of masculinity, and just to understand, like, I look at some of the teachings of Neely Fuller, who breaks down, what global white supremacy is. And so when you think about from one of his tenets of that is, one of his perspectives of that is that white supremacy dominates our sexuality. So therefore we align ourselves with whatever the white supremacist ideology is on our sexuality, on our masculinity, and on our femininity. And so from that, that's how I get my statement that we don't really know what it is to be a Black man or a Black woman without the influence of white supremacy. The way that we engage in our intimate experiences, the way that we engage in our gender experiences, we don't really know what that is. We don't really fully understand. We are just doing it as we go. And so it would be really good to be able to sit down and to have those conversations and to help people unpack how they perceive themselves. And through that exploration, it allows others to take on some of those characteristics and attributes and say, I like that. I want to bring that into my experience and start to embody that. So that's why these conversations are extremely important. Without these conversations, we just continue to move forward and pick up something here and pick up something there. And we're constantly walking through life, just trying to figure it out as we go. But we don't have to do that. We begin to come together and create community. We come together, create community, and have these dialogues. These dialogues are extremely important. Talking about history, talking about family dynamics, talking about gender dynamics, talking about spiritual dynamics, talking about daily living function, talking about the impact of trauma. What is trauma? How does trauma impact us physiologically? Those conversations are extremely important. Something that we definitely need to do.
I would add, I was just looking at my bookshelf real quick here, at least one of them. This book, Man, Heal Thyself, is a good one. I would say for folks to read. It's by Queen Afua, talking about different ways to think about wellness and thinking about masculinity specifically. And then she has another book. It's called Sacred Woman. I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with this one.
Yes.
And also, it's being able to put definitely some spirituality into it, but also what it looks like for women to be able to be in their bodies and to reclaim their bodies, right? And then this other one that I just started reading is called Africana Womanism, Reclaiming Ourselves. This is by Clenora Hudson Weems. This is a really good one too, if people are familiar with that one. So you want to check those out. I have some other ones. They're downstairs, but we'd be happy to share some of those resources with folks.
Can I just add? Okay.
Because I was going to say lastly that the impact of slavery on how we embody our masculinity and femininity can't be stated enough. The impact of slavery and how we represent ourselves as men and how we represent ourselves as women. So slavery has a big impact on how we currently represent ourselves, right? And how we currently want to be identified. We want to be identified as far away from slavery and as far away from the negative stories associated with being Black, associated with being African, associated with being slave, as far as possible. So as we move down the line, what do? We try and move towards whatever is considered a normal experience. And that normal experience is taking a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this, and we create a man and we create a woman and we move forward with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one quick thing before Rico go, because James did talk about the gender role. And one of the things I wish we had invited a sister to come on. She has an amazing program that's, Building a King. But I have to, this is both sides of the conversation, so I have to be real and ask the other side of the conversation, right? And I want to get you guys' perspective, especially you and James, because you guys understand. And I know you mentioned the books that's, from the women. But as our young man in the community, right, given the gender roles, is the effect of women teaching our young men mental health, how effective do you guys think it really is versus the impact of having men do it, right? Because I hear different things. I hear when men do it, it's a little bit more impactful. I'm not saying that women can't do it, but I just want to kind of get you guys' perspective, like when you're dealing with like our young people, we talking about the 16s, the 17s, the really young people, because we already struggle with single families and mothers raising kids. And like you guys talked about, how do we get the perspective of being a man, understanding man masculinity, understanding man ego, and we understand our young people are dealing with a lot of ego stuff, a lot of fragile egos. I just want to give feedback. Like, what do you guys think about that? And it's no knock against women. I believe our women can raise kids, do amazing things. But just from a perspective of like dealing with the violence in the community, the traumas that we deal with in our communities as young men and men in the community, the impact of having men do it versus women do it. Like, what do you guys see from a professional standpoint?
I think that people can be effective in both roles. I think that women have taken the lead in many ways to be able to educate both sides, right? I think that in the sense that I think we need to be able to spend time, and I say in our own camps from time to time, and that can be whatever a person defines as those camps. I think that being able to have those rites of passage for masculine energy, those rites of passage for feminine energy, like those need to exist, right? I think that the energy that masculine brings to just being around that same energy is really important. And then for you to define that as gender, as being male and female, or however folks are going to define it, like you need to be able to run around the folks that can cultivate the energy that you resonate with, whatever that looks like, right? If you're talking about indigenous practices, like eagles hang out with the eagles, the rams hang out with the rams, like when you're around your people or around your energy, then you're going to be able to grow, and you're going to understand what the limits are, what the weaknesses are of that by being around folks who can have those kinds of conversations and have that way of being able to connect. It's not, again, I hear you, John, is saying that it's not trying to knock women, and what they're able to do is being able to say, well, we can offer perspective. We need to be able to embrace a little bit of both. That's where the balance comes into play, right? Being able to say, well, women can share this perspective on what it means to, I'm talking about feminine energy, being able to provide perspective on masculine energy. I think it's necessary so that there is a healthy balance. But if somebody's saying, well, I'm just going to do nothing but be bullheadish or be this rock, instead of being able to understand what it means to have some water flow around me, and talking about masculine and feminine energy, the rock being the masculine energy, the water being the feminine energy, like you need to be able to understand how to navigate that. Because if you're not going to be in some way open to being able to have that water around you, you're gonna have a real dry life.
Yeah.
Pun intended, but it's like your life is gonna be dry without without some water around it. You know what I mean? You need that energy to be around you for you to actually be able to function in a healthy way.
I agree.
Did you want to add to that, Corey?
Oh, no, I agree exactly with what he's saying. I think they both have a place. I think that feminine energy is definitely needed for boys and girls, and masculine energy is definitely needed for boys and girls. It's not just one way. Both boys and girls need masculine and feminine energy in order to guide them.
I mean, I would want to see a father who is able to nurture his children in the same way I would want to see a mother nurture her children, right? but it doesn't mean that the way that the father does it is the only way to do it, right? I mean, we could, if ever the roles were flipped, right, where there's an expectation that the fathers, it was just going to be single fathers all the time, in the way that there's been a prevalence of single moms, right? Like the energy that comes with that could have been, this is a hypothetical, right? Is being able to say that's gonna also feel really imbalanced. To say, well, all this energy is coming around in this way, but not to say that those persons cannot tap into that. Like I would hope that a healthy sense of self would allow for an individual to be able to tap into both.
Sister Jada, I know you got one question over there.
I have a question that I see in the Facebook Live video, so I'm going to go ahead and ask that one. Okay, so the question is, as a single mom, how can I teach my son how to be something I'm not, a man? I can teach him my perspective of what a man should be.
I'm happy to talk on it again. I think being a man is cultural in my mind. It's social and it's cultural. And for a mom to say, well, I don't know what it's like to be a man, or I don't know how to teach being a man, then if she wants for any individual, if we want for someone to become something, we have to surround that young person and surround other folks with that, or find somebody who can emulate that, somebody who can mentor that, somebody who can model that, right? If you're saying, well, I can't do it, but I can recognize what it is, find that person, connect with that person, invite that person, allow for your child to be around that person more often so that they can start to absorb some of that energy. Right. In the same way, if you want somebody to become more familiar with Malcolm, or you want somebody to become more familiar with Etta James, or whoever you want to become more familiar with, expose them to that energy. Right. It's not to say, Mom, well, you need to figure it out, like it's going to make it happen. It's being able to say, so who's a part of your tribe that may have access to that? What's it like for us to be able to seek that out together? Because we can play telephone, you know what I mean, and say, well, do you know somebody? Let's find somebody. Because if I don't know, maybe somebody else knows. But I think that being able to identify what it is that you want, is having your vision, having your purpose, say, well, I want for my son to have more of this, or I want for my child to have more of this. Then what does it look like for families, for communities to be able to seek that out, so that child can be supported, and that for that the identity to be created.
I agree.
Jada, did you want to ask the question now, Jada, for yourself?
Yes, I did. I was holding off on this question because I love the route in which the conversation was taking, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it. So I wanted, the question that I had was, what is the best way to improve your mental well-being, especially in the state of where we are right now, especially in the pandemic? Like, I know we were talking about nutrition and diet earlier. We talked about sleep last week. And I know something that is also commonly said is, like being outdoors, being in touch with nature, but in a time when, we can't necessarily be outdoors like we want to, what are some ways that we can improve the mental well-being?
I'll take on a piece of that. I think what I recommend, my whole thing that I recommend, I definitely would recommend taking up the practice of mindfulness, taking up the practice of embracing gratitude. Mindfulness and gratitude are so powerful and impactful in terms of boosting your immune system, in terms of regulating your body functions, in terms of just giving you a sense of positive well-being. Mindfulness for me, just noticing my triggers and noticing my emotions, noticing what was taking place inside my body, and being able to identify that and speak to that, being present in the moment, recognizing how often I was going back to the past and reflecting over the past and bringing these emotions that I've already experienced into my present, or thinking about what was going to happen in the future and creating anxiety for myself. So mindfulness was definitely one that I recommend to people, just learning the practice of noticing, just noticing what's taking place in the moment, in the present moment, what's taking place and how you're feeling. So impactful, so definitely impactful.
I echo that with Okori. I think in my mind, there's nothing more powerful than breathing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think in some ways, I think a lot of folks, I don't want to put a lot, I shouldn't say a lot of folks, there's some people that take it for granted, right? It's like we breathe every day in different ways, but there's a way to have, and I talk about this a lot, is having a relationship with our breath, having a relationship with our emotions, having a relationship with the folks that are around us. But that relationship with breath, like that's the one right there. Like you can do a lot. You can cause yourself anxiety, you can cause yourself stress, you can cause yourself all these things,
Yeah.
but you can reverse all of that with the way that you breathe. Right. But I think that being able to have, just to piggyback off of what Corey is sharing, is being able to incorporate a routine for yourself during this time. I mean, talking about this being, having the shelter in place and the social distancing and all that kind of stuff, like just taking care of yourself on a daily basis, is to have a routine that you can vibe with. Have a routine that you enjoy. If that means that you're getting up in the morning and doing a little dance for yourself, or you're doing some of the gratitude stuff, things that Corey was sharing. If you're doing things that are feeding your soul, that are feeding who you are, make sure, I say make sure, but have an exercise or a practice of being able to even refresh that. In the same way that our phones, I get annoyed. My phone has an update, or a computer has to update or something. Like, it's doing that purposefully so that it stays relevant. Because if we continue to do things for ourselves that are not relevant, then we're going to fall into these moments of bouts of depression, or bouts of anxiety, or bouts of stress, because we haven't updated our systems to be able to reflect what's going on for us right now, right here and now. Right. And we can use that breath, we can use that time for ourselves to reflect and say, you know what, is what I'm doing right now helpful for me, or is it harming me in some way? Right. What am I doing on a regular that's contributing to me being in a healthy space?
Right.
Just taking 30 seconds, a minute. People are like, I don't have time to sit down and do meditation. I don't have time to sit down and do mindfulness. I don't have time to do that and the other. But we spend that much more time on social media, whatever, is being able to say, well, can I dedicate 30 seconds just to think a little bit about how what I'm doing, what I want to be able to do, is impacting me in a healthy way, a helpful way, or an unhelpful way. So I think this movement, food, social, like spiritual, like being able to incorporate those qualities, or those entities is really important.
I think also I would add that for the people that say they don't have time, it may not be your time right now. It may not be your time to be mindful right now. It may not be your time to do this work right now. But for those of you that are looking for something different, right, looking for growth, looking to expand yourself, I would definitely recommend. So what I do notice is that people will say, it's just so difficult for me to participate in meditation. My mind is all over the place. So I will say that you're right. It is difficult to do meditation in the beginning. We are learning to develop a practice, and anything that you practice, you get better at. You start off slowly. So I would say also that most people have no idea what it's like to be inside their body. You would say, like, what do you mean by that? Be inside my body. So if you think about it for a second, you have this wonderful avatar that you've been living in all your life. And you may not have ever taken the moment to really recognize or to feel what it feels like to own your big toe. That's your big toe. To own your foot, to recognize your leg, your thigh, right? To recognize your stomach, to recognize your breath, what it feels like going in and out of your body, to recognize what the inside of your mouth feels like, to recognize what it feels like to the crown of your head, to become familiar with your body, to become familiar with this car, this machine, this avatar that you're likely going to spend 100 years in, right? Great way to begin. And then after that, once you get familiar with your body, starting to become familiar with your breath. Because just like we said earlier, your breath, you can do so much with that. And sometimes we say we don't have time to sit down. Well, it doesn't take very much. I'm going to give you a practice. There's a practice called box breathing. You guys don't know what it is, you can look it up. Box breathing is synchronized breathing. You can start off with 4 seconds, 4-second breath in, hold it 4 seconds, let it go 4 seconds, and hold it 4 seconds. It's really good at calming the central nervous system down. People in the military use it, martial artists use it, people that are in high stress positions use this often. You can go 4-second breathing, you can do 8 seconds, you can go 12 seconds. Another one is pranayama, that's alternating nostril breathing. You can look that up. pranayama. The next one I would recommend is Wim Hof breathing. It's bringing in a lot of oxygen into the body, changing the cellular level, alkalizing the body. Breathing is so important. It helps you to get to know you. And as you get to know you, you're becoming mindful. And as you incorporate all these things, you'll find once you start doing it, you're going to seek after it. Because once you start meditating, you're going to want to seek after it. You will want to find every moment that you can just to have that space inside yourself, because that space inside yourself is magnificent. It is absolutely amazing, right? Once you're able to find that space and that comfort inside yourself, and you realize that there's a whole world, a vast universe inside yourself that doesn't compare to the world that we're living in right now at all.
That sounds a lot like, to me, in talking to you yesterday, Okori, I definitely see you as someone who is very wise. So a lot of stuff you say, I hold on to and be like, okay, so we was talking and then you were mentioning consciousness. And you were saying, and consciousness have to do with being aware of self, right? So,
yeah,
and what I'm hearing you saying is the effort is more conscious. It's more of like, how do I deal with self in our day-to-day routines? And I'm only speaking for myself. In the day-to-day routines that I go through, I've been pretty privileged to been taught consciousness at an adolescent stage, like self-awareness is the most important awareness, right? Because it gives you the awareness, not just of self, but outside of self. Once you do, and you are in tune with self, and you are able to take personal inventory and do all these different things that encompass that. But when you mentioned it yesterday, and what you're saying now is, how do we get people in our community to better understand the conscious thought, opposed to, because like, a part of white supremacy, and I don't even know if it's white supremacy, but I think that a part of what we're taught is that consciousness is education, far as academia, or it's a knowledge of a lot of something, right? When to me, like, that's not conscious. That's just, you're aware, or your eyes is kind of, like you said yesterday, you're woke, right? So how do we get folks to unravel that, to start looking at consciousness as more about self-awareness? And when you're aware of self, you're pretty much conscious of everything around you, because you start to think, if I'm doing this, am I offending this person? You begin to gain compassion and empathy and all these different other qualities. So like, how do we get community to better understand that? And is it just really just starting off with just the small practices that you mentioned?
Absolutely. Starting with the small practices that you mentioned, and that we're doing it right now. By you just bringing that conversation up, you're exposing people to a new frame of thought. Someone may not have ever thought about that. The difference between being conscious and being woke, because we do use that word consciousness as a way of knowing. We say, I'm conscious because I have information. I have information about the outside world. But real consciousness is really about having the information about self. Right? Knowing thyself. That is the real level of consciousness. It's okay to be woke. You have information about all these different historical things. You're conscious. You understand that. But being truly conscious is to know self, is to know yourself, is to know what things have impacted you over the course of your lifetime. What triggers have impacted you? Was it because your mom used to do something to you that made you feel insecure, and as a result of feeling insecure, you are quick to respond to someone that tries to challenge you? Was it because your dad was what you identify as a bully and made you feel afraid, that because now you don't ever want to feel like that again, so you stand up to every man and nobody will push on you? Being able to identify that, being able to identify where your frailties are, right? That's where consciousness is. And then you also have to understand what subconscious is, what the subconscious mind does, because the subconscious mind takes all those little things that you have fears about, and as soon as the body becomes aware of a particular trigger from your perceptions, because you got your perceptions, you got you got hearing, you got sight, you got taste, you got smell, you got touch. You have your senses. Those are your perceptions. Once those things become aware of something that makes you feel uncomfortable, then it goes into the subconscious, and the subconscious starts talking about it, and now there you go. And you're on a whole cycle. So knowing what's in the conscious mind, knowing what's in the subconscious mind, and how those things can become triggers for you, and how we respond to those things, right? How those thoughts continue to ruminate or continue to just move in our minds and just over and over and over and over. And we're going back to the past, making the past the present. And now all of a sudden we're ready to fight. And we always hear, you got me messed up. You have me messed up, right? So really what it is that you went back to the past and you got yourself messed up because you never had time, or you haven't taken time to really reflect and identify what your triggers are. Triggers that belong to you when you were a child, triggers that belong to you while you're a young adult. And some of the best ways that we identify our triggers is when we're in relationships, because relationships are mirrors to who we are. We learn nothing about the partner that we're with. We learn everything about ourselves. But it takes some guidance through that in order to successfully move through that.
That was beautifully stated.
Thank you.
But I was gonna say, Jay, what you got for us?
I mean, I don't say to expand on it, but I mean to continue with it. I mean, there's the community on the outside, and there's a community on the inside.
Right.
There's a community that we have that we deal with, that we interact with, and again, having a relationship with on the outside. But what does it look like for us to have and to define a relationship with ourselves? And that's also a community. Like we have community of organs, we got a community of blood vessels, we got a community of veins, like a brain that we have to manage the thoughts around community. It's communicating with itself. And if we're not intimate, if we don't take time to be intimate with that, then it's going to be messed up.
Yeah.
That internal stuff is going to come outside. It's going to affect the outside community. And that's exactly what's happening for us, right? In our community, is that when we're not dealing with the stuff that's happening inside, then it starts to, impact or infect in some way the things that are happening outside of us. I mean, I want to call us viruses, but we get to become our own healing vessels, so that the healing can stay in ourselves, and it can also, in the same way, inject itself into the outside community. So being able to say, so I agree 100% with what Corey is sharing. It's like we got to be in tune with both, right? What's happening on internally, especially with what we're conscious of, and talking about being woke or not, being able to say, well, what am I actually focusing on that is healthy for me? I go back to that, going back to what's healthy for me, what's healing for me, and what are the things that I might not be aware of that are also impacting me, which could be, say, in a subconscious, thinking about things that, again, that we're not thinking about after we've consumed it. Like, how does it continue to live inside of us? Because after we've had a drink of water, like it satisfied that thirst for the moment, but that's not taking care of us for the next day. It's just taking care of the right now. So what are we doing? What are we doing for practices that allow for us that are sustainable? Right? What are we doing for ourselves that are sustainable?
Well, Rico, you brought up that when we were doing those groups, that I would bring up a lot of historical stuff, sometimes esoteric stuff. So I'm gonna share something with the community that's on the Zoom right now. All right, so I would imagine that everybody knows what a sphinx is. If you don't know what a sphinx is, that's the big statue in Kemet, or Egypt. Those of you that don't know what Kemet is it's the new word for that. The Greek term for that, the Greek land, is called Egypt. The original name was Kemet. That was when all black civilization, black folks lived there. It was a large civilization that had a lot going on, but that's beside the point. So anyway, there's something there called a sphinx. And the sphinx is the body of a lion with the face of a man. So I think that might be able to help you identify. The body of the lion represents the beast. The face of the man represents the master. That whole statue, that whole thing represents you. That is an image of you. Your physical body is a beast. Its only responsibility is to have sensations and feelings. Sensations and feelings. The body, the master must manage the beast. The master is what sits on your shoulders. It lives in the temple. The temple is your skull. Living inside your skull is the master. The master must always manage the beast. If not, the beast will constantly manage the master. And you may see this when you see people get upset. You see them angry. You see them crying. You see them screaming. You see them easily triggered. You see them living in their primal state. For those of you that know what chakras are, that's your first chakra, the lower level. The lower level chakra where everything is, your negative energy. All you want to do is eat, sleep, have sex. You want to feel good. You deal with everything at that base level. It is very primal. In order to move up that primal, up from that primal level, up the chakras, you must learn how to manage your emotions. You must learn how to become conscious of self. You must learn to identify what it is that lives inside of that avatar. You have a relationship with that thing that lives inside of that avatar. Some people call it God, some people call it the Father, some people call it different things. You must understand who is running that avatar. So remember that your body is a beast. It is primal responsibility, is sensation and feeling. It is only your body that is remembering negative experiences or past experiences anytime you come into discomfort. The master must learn to manage the beast, or the beast will always control the master.
Wow, that was deep right there. That was a $1 million gem right there. That touched me. I think I'm struggling with that every day, trying to figure out how to control the beast. So I think for me, that's powerful right there. Like anybody hearing that, like that's a gem. James, what you were saying, like, about the subconscious, man, I think that's the biggest struggle in the Black and brown community that we deal with, right? Because the subconscious is all the images and the thoughts and the things that's going on that we don't even pay attention to.
And
but
they're
it's
fed
there.
by the media. They're fed by the influence of media and propaganda, right? So those psychic attacks that we have, those psychic attacks, those spells, people call it witchcraft. You know, people say witchcraft ain't no such thing. Well, really it is. I mean, witchcraft is just the ability, you know, it comes from Wicca, which was taught by the Druids, and the Druids got taught by the Twa, and the Twa were in Kemet. So it's a big old deal, right? But anyway, the whole thing about spells and incantations, those are the words that we use every day. The words, the incantations that we use to draw things on ourselves and hold ourselves down, and the spells that are used to hold us down by listening to media, by the propaganda, through the music. All these things play a big role in feeding our subconscious and keeping us in a state where we're in a constant battle with ourselves.
Wow, that's deep. Rico, you had something to say. I see you popped up. Yeah, that's deep. I mean, because this, especially with this TV, man, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's really having a big impact on like, you know, just family relationships and family dynamics, man. You know, this real TV they talk about, man, you see these shows and how it's impacting our ladies and our men. It's crazy, man. And like, that's deep, man. That's deep.
And James or Corey, I might ask you both to, you know, ask a question. I know you both might agree on a question, but I know like how it is for, you know, my sons, right? So my son responds to me because I'm their father, right? And it's a good response, and I respect the response that I get, and I think it's a good one. But a lot of times me and John, we do things together, and John get a totally different response out of it, right? Which is a good one. I'm like, okay, John, you their mentor, come on, right? So I asked that, and I asked you guys sometime, I might say, hey, Jay, what's your thoughts? Only because somebody on here might be listening, and they might, you know, sometimes we just want to, some people get information differently from different people. So, you know, I that's why I'm saying it, and I might just say, and I know you might agree with him, but, you know, formalizing in our own words sometimes help other people with receiving information. So Corey, and James, I got this last little. Well, it's not the last because I know a bunch of questions gonna be popping in my head as we continue. But well, I mean, it's more of a statement, and I kind of want to concur to what Corey was saying and being able to master yourself, but then also being conscious of who you are. So I remember when I was 10 years old, and at 10 years old, at 10 years old, I went through a ritual called Obia. Obia is a ritual that we go through. It's like a boys to men ritual. And at that time, I wasn't able to go through with it because my generation was all at the official age of 13. So I did end up going and I did end up participating, but I wasn't fully, I didn't go fully through and complete the ritual because it wasn't my time, but I was able to participate. So in some of the practices that we did, it helps you to go, like remember things and go back in your consciousness and in that subconscious to remember different things that has happened in your life so that you can rid yourself of some of those things that has happened, in terms of it'll always probably be a thought or always probably be there, but addressing it helps when it arises again or the trigger happened again. It helps you to, you know, address it. So during that time, I was able to realize when my first traumatic incident ever happened, right? So, and it's weird. Most people don't trust that this ever, I mean, they don't think that if you're conscious enough, you can remember things when you were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, right? So I'm 10 years old and we were going through the ritual and I'm just listening and I really couldn't fully participate, but I did the exercise and I realized when my first traumatic incident, and that incident was when I was 9 months old. So at 9 months years old, my mom was 6 months pregnant with my sister, and me and my sister is exactly 1 year apart. My mom put me down on the ground at 6 months pregnant and never picked me back up. And as a child, I held that as a resentment against my sister, not against my mom. It was against my sister. Like, why are you being born? Like, you know what I'm saying? So, and I remember like going to Safeway and Fillmore with no, my mom had the stroller pushing her and I had to walk. So can you imagine a 1.5-year-old walking 4 blocks, 5 blocks, and at a mother's pace compared to a child's pace? It was pretty traumatic to me. And I'm saying that only to say, and to concur with what Corey and what James was saying is that when you do get in tune with your conscious self and you are able to filter through a lot of those things and talk out a lot of that stuff, thoughts and things that has happened to you in the past, it'll just come up like a movie. I mean, like, I don't know how it just pop in my head, like, you know, and it was just like, wow, like, and I was able to address it and even go to my mom with it, like, Mom, you was an amazing mom, but you know, I felt this way all this time. You know what I mean? I found the way to frame it because I didn't want her to pop me, but but I found a way to actually frame it to say, you know what, Mom, you did an amazing job for being an amazing mom that you was. And, you know, but I did have a resentment against this, and then apologizing to my sister for the resentment that I did have, and to myself, because it was nothing to hold a resentment for. It was just what it was. So I just wanted to concur to what y'all was saying, that just to bring context to that, it is true to what y'all saying, and that it does help you later on in life.
Rico, can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
How did that impact you in your relationships before you came to that awareness? In terms of just having a level of connection, how important was connection for you in your relationships?
I was clingy. Let me see.
You was clingy.
Yeah. So I guess it was a form of abandonment. So in that form of abandonment, I held on to relationships, even if they were bad for me. I just wanted to cling on to it because I didn't want to feel the abandonment again, you know. So until that moment, but then after that moment, it was more like, you know what, I got to be content with myself, and you know, that's the only way that I'll make someone else happy, And then I ended up meeting my wife, and we've been married for 16 years. So,
Yeah.
you know, it ended up working out.
I only asked that question just to show the connection between past traumas that become subconscious and how we, from our subconscious, we draw or we create relationships all from our subconscious. The energy connects to our subconscious. We create those relationships. And inside those relationships, that back and forth that we have is always an opportunity for us to correct it. We don't always see it, but it's always there. Our subconscious always brings back up what we plant down. So you planted that down. That was a pain. That was something that was traumatic for you. That got planted in your subconscious. Your subconscious then planted seeds and birthed children. The children of the subconscious were the relationships that you had that made you say or identify yourself as clingy or holding on to bad relationships until you were able to identify what the trigger was and what the experience was. And then once you were able to do that, you were able to successfully move through it.
John.
What's going on? James, you want to chime in on that, James?
I agree 100%. I mean, I think the way that's it though, right? It's like when you think about all the seeds that are being planted in our experiences, right? It doesn't matter if we water that seed necessarily enough. That seed's going to grow. That's just the way that that's the way that we are as human beings. Right? We can say, "Oh, that thing didn't bother me," and really it did. Right? And we don't have to say, "Well, I'm not paying attention to it." But every time we would say that we're not paying attention to it, it's giving it the energy to grow.
Right. Yep.
Right. That's how the seeds of the mind work. It's different than seeds that we call physical seeds, because those seeds can die. Those seeds can do whatever they're going to do. There's a parallel in a way, but like those seeds they'll blow in the wind. But the seeds that get implanted in the mind, like what Corey was saying before, our bodies, this avatar is the most complex, the largest computer that has ever existed. Right? As much as they're going to try and replicate and try and do all these different things to modify this, that, and the other, like the original, in my mind, it's inexplainable. As much as as science wants to say, we're going to figure out how to clone this, that, and the other, the original is always going to be the most perfect manifestation of that, right? And the way that it operates, the operating system that we have, it just and we're still trying to figure it out, right? It's that beautiful. It's that magnificent. So just in thinking about the seeds and how they grow and what it means for us to respond to them, react to them, take care of them, like all of that is worth paying attention to. And I see a lot of people that I connect with. We have opportunities to, we don't always take the opportunity to see what's there, so that we can see what the vibrations are, or what those lights are. What I say to folks sometimes is that the emotions that we experience kind of happen on like the lights on a Christmas tree. Some of them shine a little bit brighter than others. Right. Talking about, anger, talking about joy, talking about hurt, those kind of things. Like at every experience of our life, that those lights are lighting up in some shape, form, or another. If I experience joy, all the joy that I experience in my life is going to light up. If I experience hurt, all the experiences of hurt are going to light up. They might not all light up in the same fashion, right? But they're going to light up. And the ones that shine brighter, like they're going to heat up. Everybody knows what happens when light bulbs get too hot. They burn out, right? Or something's going to be affected. And we get to see how much attention we want to pay to those things so that they don't become affected, so that we don't burn out, so that those emotions don't become sore spots for us, or that those thoughts or those experiences don't become sore spots for us, so that we can, I say, thrive, right? So we can live in balance with ourselves, or live in balance with our community.
Man, that's deep, man. I mean, you and Corey, man, y'all doing something for me. So I don't know about everybody else out there. I mean, I think this just, it's a perfect conversation to have. I mean, me being 41 years old, working with Rico and Jada, like I'm really at 41, really tapping in to the techniques and the things of mental health, because like you said, it's a lot of it we just don't even think about it. You know what I mean? And just hearing Corey talk about breathing, like I didn't even pay attention. I know we kind of talked about it, but just really to understand how it's so connected. And then just hearing you, James, from last week to this week saying like it's okay. Like when you're going through things, your rest. Like this weekend, I had a crazy weekend. I was like, I just got to shut down. Like I got to turn my phone off. I just got to do me. So definitely the experience of having this conversation has helped me dramatically. I mean, just it's impacted me. Like, and it's making me think more. And just the stuff that he's talking about, you know, from the mind to the body, just controlling the beast. Like that's deep, man. Like that, I got to process that, unpack that. That's our word at both sides of the conversation. Rico's always unpacking.
Unpack it.
And that's why it was so important. Thank you so much, Corey, for coming on. I was telling John about you, told him, you know, how deep you were, you know, and how it would be a great balance between you and James on here, because to me, like, y'all personalities are similar, and y'all both talk with that smooth voice. So I don't know if it's a clinical thing, but it's a smooth tone all the way through, right? No matter what, you know. But I like that though, because I don't know what it is, but I think there's a lot in sound also that, you know, keeps a person balanced, and it keeps them, when you're talking to them, I don't know what's the tone called that y'all using, but that tone right there, it's like music to my ears. Like, okay, you know, I open fully up. You know what I'm saying? And Corey, no, like, he got some good information. Like, I wish that he could create a whole curriculum around the information he was giving them young boys, because I've seen them, and I've had conversation with them young men outside the group. And, you know, a lot of times we think they're not paying attention when they really listening. Like, they really, really paying attention, and they listening. They want more information. And as a grown man, I'm in the class, and I'm like, dang, Corey really dropping Jews. Like, they don't know, like, these are like, you know, the most expensive Jews possible. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, like how do we create those type of curriculums to bring into our community that is educational, but then also therapeutic for our young people? Because I've been a witness on one end of consciousness and healing myself, and it wasn't just me. It was every person that I come across who have given me jewels and have given me information and tools to use in my life. But then I want to see other people get it. And a lot of times I get frustrated because I'm not a robot, or I'm not a android. And my thinking is not like that. So when I see people buy off into propaganda and a lot of the social media and a lot of stuff that is pushed out there, and they're not looking at the true facts of things and the true way of things, I get very frustrated, and I gotta go into my mode and just kind of like be like, okay, that's not for you to hold. You can express what you feel, but it's not up to me to hold. Because sometimes I hold it. Like, how they not see that? Like, how you not see that they shifting your thought to that bull crap that doesn't make any sense, right? But I'm just thankful that, you know, to have you guys on, and I think that it'll be good, John, if at some point, like as we grow, like, this is like really, really healing. I know out there, as I'm watching the feed, a lot of people is very, very thankful for you guys being on, and a lot of people got a lot of information this Sunday. I mean, they get it every Sunday, but this Sunday is very special to me. You know, I got my guy Corey on here for show. So, you know, that's big for me. And James also, you know, but the information that you guys are giving is real jewels, and I'm just praying that, you know, there is people who saying that they, you know, taking the information and going to apply it, but I'm just praying that this information can be applied in everyone everyday life, because these are definitely the gems and the jewels to actually heal thyself. Like I mentioned last week, there's a scripture that talks about physician heal thyself, and our bodies is a natural physician, and it'll tell you when you need to heal yourself. When you get them headaches, it's telling you something. When you get them little cramps in your side, it's telling you something. But being able to listen to those different things. And I think that Corey and James today was our physicians, you know, telling us that we need to heal thyself, so that way we can be on a good road to recovery. You know, trauma for every person is different. You know, it's, you know, what's not traumatic for me can be someone's, like, just, you know, ultimate trauma. So just being able to look at it in that perspective. And I tell all the mothers out there and fathers, if you got productive and amazing men and women in your life, surround your children around those people, because you don't know who your child is looking at. And those people that they are looking at, they always take things from them. So, you know, whether it's good or whether it's bad, I would say keep your children around people who are doing positive things and doing amazing things. Jada, before, do you have anything before John asks his last question?
I do. The question that I have, because we've touched upon the idea of how relationships, how those are affected. And I just wanted to ask the question of, in what ways can the effects of unaddressed trauma manifest in your life other than relationships?
Oh boy, every aspect of your life. It can come up as health issues. It can, in terms of just your physical health and well-being, right? It can come up in your social interactions, how you engage with people. It can come up in, let me see, God, everything that you do, unaddressed trauma. You can shut down and isolate. You become isolative, so it creates more mental health issues for youth in terms of isolation. It can create suicidality. It can create a number of different, you name it. If it's a negative thing, unaddressed trauma can manifest that.
That's, I agree. It's like Corey just says it all. I can't, what I would say is that anything that we do that involves making a decision or responding can be effective. Right. Anything that requires a decision, that's relationships. It's what we put in our, and what we talk about with other people, what we decide that we're going to respond to or what not we're going to respond to. Just in our how we sense what's going on, how we sense danger, what we don't see as danger, like all those things come into play when it comes to unaddressed trauma, right? I think that is how we even view a situation, right? How we even view what is in front of us changes based on the experiences that we've had, if it's going to be traumatic or not, right? I think all of that's impacted. What we think is safe to put into our bodies, what we think is safe for us to touch, what we think is safe for us to, I think all of that is impacted. Anything that is related to making a decision, I think that we are by nature people who want to be able to connect. And this thought about response, like when you do something, I'm going to decide to respond in some kind of way to that. Right? But if I've experienced any number of traumas, like I'm going to decide whether or not I want to stay connected to you or if I'm going to run up direction. I'm talking about the fight-flight response, the fight or flight responses. I'm not sure. I didn't talk about it the last time, but if folks are curious about, I'm not sure if you read it too, or Corey is this guy. His name is Resma Menakem. I'm talking about how trauma shows up in the body, right? But there's like the fight, flight, freeze, and he added another one called annihilate. It's like when you see a threat, like you either want to, engage with it, fight it, flight, freeze, or annihilate. And annihilate is like, I got to destroy this thing because I think that threat is so intimidating for me. It's going to create a sense of safety. It's not maintainable, right? So that's what I would add. Just in response to how does unaddressed trauma show up in the body, it's in those ways.
And just another.
Go
Sorry,
ahead,
go
Jada.
ahead. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. In another kind of follow-up question to that I have is, so your mention of social interactions. So how, I'm kind of having trouble putting together this question, but I'm thinking of the effects of social media and how our interactions cannot necessarily always be in person. It can be through various social media platforms. How does that have a play in our unaddressed trauma?
Well, those things are based in perception. When you are on social media, it's stressed in your perception of that experience, your interpretation of that experience. Your perception and interpretation is deeply connected to your value system. And according to your value system, that's what you will try to defend, right? If you feel like it's attacking your values, then you will respond to that in whatever way you feel necessary to defend yourself or to defend that value. So if you have trauma that you're holding, then your values may be Your values may be sitting really, really on edge, where you are very cautious and very in tune to, sensitive to every experience that you have, because you want to protect yourself. And those values are there to protect you. And so once those values become challenged, you are likely to respond in order to protect those values. So based on the perception of experience, you protect your values. Got it?
100% agree. I was thinking the same exact thing, and thinking about how we respond to what we think is a threat, say a threat, or was pushing on what we believe is important to us.
Right.
That right there, I don't think I can say it any differently. I think that based on what we believe is valuable, it's like if it's materialistic, if it's family related, if it's love or whatever that thing is, if we perceive something that is a threat to that, then we're going to respond. If we don't see a threat to it, then we're not going to respond, and that's going to impact the way that we interact with our world. So that's Corey said it.
I think one of the biggest things that we have to recognize is that our biggest challenges are dealing with fear and control, right? Because when we are afraid, we want to defend ourselves, and when we lose control, we want to defend ourselves. Most of all of our responses are based in that. All of our negative responses are based in fear and control. Needing to control outcomes, needing to control people, needing to control the outside world. We reach outside of ourselves because we lose control. We lose control of what's happening inside of ourselves. We have a moment of dissidence, which means that we face something that we believe one thing inside of ourselves that doesn't match up to what's outside. And then we have a conflict inside of ourselves, and we reach out to try and control that on the outside. And we have difficulty controlling the outside, and we use rage and anger to control the outside, manipulation, sometimes depression used to control the outside. That way we can pull other people in to soothe us. And that sometimes is how depression ends up happening. The hormonal balance gets out of control. And next thing you know, it is a hormonal issue, but sometimes we get depressed because we can't get people to respond to us in a way that we want them to respond, because of the value that we place on ourselves. So, in those conditions, we have fear or anger and control. So those are things that we need to be aware of as well. So that's all part of knowing yourself, all part of noticing, all part of being mindful, all part of being present in the moment, because the only thing that really exists, and I'm sure you guys have heard it before, but I just want to echo it and validate it, that the only thing that exists is the present moment. Everything that happened in the past is gone, has no relevance in your life. All it can do is serve to bring up memories of experiences. And all you can do in that memory is replay that tape in your head over and over and over again. And you can try to change it all the ways that you want to, but you can never change it. Never, ever, ever change it. But you can say how it should have been, it could have been, it shouldn't have been this way, but it is. And the sooner we learn to accept the past as it is, we choose to move forward. But sometimes what ends up happening is we get stuck in the need to not want to let go. We don't want to let go. And then we have another thing that we do is we do predictive thinking. So we think about things in our brain, and we think about what's going to happen, and that's called predictive thinking. And as we predict what's going to happen, we get anxiety, we get anger. We already thinking we know, but we really don't know. We really don't know. The only thing that we know is what's happening right now. So I would say, hopefully, that everybody on this call right now is sitting in a space where they're safe and they're comfortable and they're breathing, and they have function of their eyes, they have function of their ears, they have function of their feet. Hopefully they have a place where they can lay down at night. So those are things to be grateful for. We start thinking about gratitude. And the more we think about what we're grateful for, the more joy we bring into our bodies. And the more joy we bring into our bodies, the more uplifted we feel. And the more uplifted we feel, the better we are.
Wow, wow, that's deep, man. I'm so blessed and honored to be on this call with you guys. Rico told me y'all was deep, man. You and Jay, like this is like Rico said, it's textbook stuff, man. We got to get this. I mean, we got like almost 15, 20 minutes left. I mean, I think you guys are at a right spot right now because of the pandemic. I just want to see if you guys, Rico, if you are okay with it, everybody, like the last 15 minutes, just talk about like this relationship stuff, because we are in the pandemic. We got people in the house with people that they don't want to be with. We got people that single trying to find people. We hear all of these issues about toxic relationships, the control thing you just talked about. A lot of men are talking about women are so controlling. Like, how do we deal with some of that part of the relationship in the mental health and awareness to have healthier relationships, to have better communication? Because, you know, at both sides of the conversation, we about unity, we about bringing the community together, we about bringing families together. And how do we do that relationship-wise and what you guys were just talking about?
Can we turn that into a two-part question?
Hold on to your question, Rico. Hold on to your question, Rico. Just hold on.
Okay,
Let me just jump on that real quick. So, brother, I'm going to say that, of course, we want to have successful relationships. But relationships means to relate to other people, the way in which we as an individual relate to other people. We cannot fully relate to another person unless we are fully grounded ourselves. So this moment, this last 6 months or 7 months that we've had to sit down has been and I would have never said this before, but I have to say it now because I had to come to the understanding of that it has been a great opportunity for me to get to know me, for me to get to know what my issues are, for me to get to know my baggage. So the more I get to see what my issues are, the more I get to see how my relationship is, the more I get a chance to be honest with myself about my relationship and about where I want to be in my relationship, whether my partner is a good fit for me or whether my partner is not a good fit for me, right? So sometimes when we get in these catastrophes like this, we reach out and we want our partner to soothe us. We want our partner to save us. We want our partner to love on us just a little bit harder, right? But the reality is that love that we're looking for is the love that we need to give ourselves. What does it mean to fully love yourself, right? What does it mean to embrace that, to love yourself, to validate yourself, and not expect someone on the outside to do that? Because remember, relationships are only mirrors of what's inside you right now. All your struggle, that relationship is a mirror to that. So then what we end up doing is we project our frustration onto our partner when our partner doesn't satisfy our needs. Because those are things inside of us from our subconscious mind again that we haven't had met. And if we've already been satisfied in that area of our subconscious mind and we've worked through it and we recognize that our partner is doing something that doesn't serve us and we're not connected to that, then we can be honest and say, you know what, I really respect you and I appreciate what you brought to me thus far, but I think this is about as far as I can go, right? You can make that choice. That's a choice that you make. You don't have to make that choice. It's just a choice. And either choice that you make is going to be the perfect thing for you. There is no right or wrong. It's just a choice.
Wow, that was perfectly explained, my brother. Gee whiz,
All right.
that was. Go ahead, Rico. Go ahead, Rico.
All right. I got this question. So we did a segment, I think it was maybe like 4 weeks ago, on the Black community, or an in-depth conversation with the faith-based community and the Black community. It was a healing conversation because a lot of honesty came out of the conversation. What I want to know is, what part does religion play in healing compared to spirituality? Because everyone doesn't understand that there's a difference between religion and spirituality. Like they think, I mean, sometimes it could tie together depending on how a person is utilizing it. But I see a difference in it. So how does it play a part in the therapeutic process or in getting the community to heal?
They're both faith-based. They're both faith-based. And faith is about you. According to your faith, so be it unto you. Right? So now if you want to look at dogma, you know, then that's a little different. Religious dogma versus spiritual dogma. Well, spiritual dogma may have a practice that helps you to unfold and gives you some steps in order to increase your capacity, your awareness, and your abilities. When religious dogma, I would say, doesn't necessarily give you any tools to become more godlike, but spirituality can give you some tools to become, quote unquote, more godlike.
I 100% agree. I think the do as I say do, part of if you know, in certain practices in certain religions specifically, doesn't give you the insight necessarily. I mean, it's a guide, and I think in some ways, right, to be able to say, well, we want for us, if it's going to be the dogmatic part, we want for us to follow in this way, but what does it actually mean for me as an individual? It gets real murky. Right. So to be able to get to a place where I can go back to what Corey was saying earlier, to get to know myself, like what's it like for me to do that? Like that kind of an approach, that dogma, that I don't want to offend anybody, but you don't say, well, it's this scripture, you got to follow this scripture to the T. Well, you got to look at yourself and we all have our own individual stories. And just because, you know, a book said or somebody said that you have to behave in this way, you got to look at yourself. You got to say what's resonating for me about this for this moment in time for me. But if I'm looking at, I'm going back to what Corey was sharing a little bit earlier, and just kind of talking about that previous question about relationships, like we get to look at our own histories, and think about if there's something different, if anyway, for me to look at my history. Like I really appreciate what Corey said about being able to get into a place of acceptance, because there isn't accepting of what I experienced during that time, but I don't have to necessarily accept the way that I responded to it, right? I can say I can respond differently to it now in this mindset, in this current time, because I cannot go back in time and change any of that stuff for myself. I can change how I look at it. I can say, you know what, that thing happened, that was unfortunate. You know, I can, you know, have this moment and grieving and say, you know, I wish that something different had happened. However, right now, I get to make decisions that are going to be beneficial to me in the way that takes that into consideration, right? But I get to have a different future for myself based on what I think about myself right now, and paying attention to what I might be attracted to, pay attention to what I'm drawn towards, so that if there is anything that's unhealthy about that, then I can make some better decisions for myself in the direction that I'm going. But to relate it to religion or to spirituality, we can say, well, what's an accurate guide for me at this point? Is that something that I can resonate with? And I can say, you know what, I'm gonna do it this way. Is that the only way? Is this the only way? I can say that for myself. I had that question growing up as a young person. Is this the religion that I need to be following? Do I trust what's happening here? Or is there something else that I can also consider that can benefit me or can benefit my community, right? Consistently. And that's, I keep saying back to this, saying this word sustainable. Is it sustainable for me? Is it sustainable for the folks that are around me? Because if it's not sustainable, I don't think I want to do it.
Right. Absolutely. You know, like you look at religious dogma and they talk about sin. But if you look up what the etymology of sin is, it just means missing the mark. The definition of sin is missing the mark. You gotta, you know, there's a lot of things in religious dogma that we have interpretations of, and we rarely take the time to fully research. You know, like I know a little bit of scripture, just a little bit, like study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, but rightly divide the word of truth. So in that there's study, and there's divide, and there's truth. So to study means to do what? To do research. To divide means to take apart, to open things up in sections. And truth always stands on its own. So you have to be able to do the research to find out what things are, find out what these names mean, find out what these things mean, because many of them are allegories. Many of them are stories about a story about an experience. And most of those stories about stories and experiences are about you as the individual. And so you have to be able to really understand what those things mean. And, you know, that's not something that we're taught, because our religious values are generally handed down to us transgenerationally from our parents, from our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our great-great-grandparents, you know, for some of us all the way back to it's slavery, right? All the way back to that. So we have to be aware of what we're studying, and then even understanding what it was before then. Because even white people, you know, even though we pretty much got Judeo-Christianity, and I say that intentionally, Judeo-Christianity, we received that from them. They've even been impacted by it to a degree that they have an understanding of it. So you have to understand what the difference between Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, what the origin of Judeo-Christianity is, what the origin of Christianity is. And once you begin to understand those things, they unpack the story for you. And when you have that story all laid out, you're able to make an informed decision. So at the end of the day, I would just recommend make an informed decision on what you put your faith in, so that you fully understand what that is, and not just make your determination based on something that was given to you and you say, I know. Because the reality is that most of the time, to have gnosis, to know, means that you've had an experience in that, and you've been able to fully identify what that thing is, how it exists, and how it stands. And most of the time we don't know. We've been given information, and we take that on because our mothers gave it to us, or our grandmothers, and we hold it based on that. So, and I'm hoping I'm not offending anyone, because that's not my intention. My intention is only to open your mind up a little bit, to be thoughtful, and to think about using an etymology dictionary, looking up the origin of words, going back as far as you can. Look at the Hebrew origin of the word, right? Look who the Hebrew people were. Look at those things. Look at all those things before it became Greek, right? Look up all of those things so that you understand. Look up Jesus. Look up the name. When was the Bible written? I'm gonna tell you, 1611 AD. So the 1611, that wasn't much further than when they came to America. They came to America in 1492. So think about the King James Version, 1611. They came to America in 1492. They set sail. So you got to think about those dates. Think about what something called revisionist history. Think about where you play in history. Think about who was here when, I'm going off subject, but think about who was here when they came here. Not Native Americans. Those people came from Central Asia and came through the Baltic Straits, down into Alaska and down into America. There were already people here when those people came here. They look like us, just like all the other 5 continents. Oops, somebody say 5 continents is 7. No, it's only 5 continents. America is one continent. North and South America is one body of land, right? So when those people came here, just like in all the other indigenous places, all the people were melanated people. They were all melanated people, whether you're in Asia, Afro-Asia, whether you're in America, Turtle Island, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Europe, the Grimaldi, where the black people in Europe. Those were all our places. The people that lived in the mountains were the Albans. The Albans came down, they mixed in with the black people, and thus we have people that we have now. There were only 2 species. One were Albans, and the other were us. And as a result of that, we populated the world. So you got to know who you are. You got to know where your religion comes in. You got to understand what God is. You got to understand what the Son is. You got to understand what the Holy Ghost is. I'm not going to go into that with you, but one day maybe you'll find that out, who your Father is and who God is, and you'll understand who the Son is, and you'll understand who the Holy Spirit is. And once you guys understand that, you'll understand the importance that you hold you'll understand what you are, and you'll understand what spirituality is, and you'll understand the implications of religious dogma.
Yeah, that's a whole different segment if we go all the way into
Yeah.
those three areas. Because we kind of touched on it yesterday, and I was getting so excited, I kind of ran late going somewhere else. But I was just excited to hear the conversation, and yeah. But that'll be a good topic. I definitely will be hitting you back up for that because
I don't know about that one.
I mean, that's what both sides of the conversation is about. It's about creating space where, where the truth can be spoken. And when the truth is spoken, you can disagree, but, it's conversation. And through conversation, it creates communication, and communication creates healing. So, people don't have,
Sister Rico, some things, Rico, are about the journey. Some people have to go through the journey in order to find that out. Right? So I learned early. I learned later on more so that those that know don't tell, and those that tell don't really know.
Right. That's deep.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Well, we at our last 5-minute point. Jada, do you have any final questions before we go? Your last words?
I do not have any final questions, but definitely want to thank you both. This was a lot to take in and learn, and I'm very grateful for it. And I will be watching the recording again to get another look at the books that were shared. Yeah, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Yes, it's showed up a pleasure, you guys. I mean, I love chatting with you, Corey. Like hearing your perspective. Like everything that I heard from you is just, it encourages curiosity. Right, being curious about ourselves and curious about our community, like that's it right there. The more that we're curious, the more we want to I say seek, reveal, and apply what's available to us. There's no limit. So I'm just.
Are you gonna have another men's group?
I would love to be able to. I was just talking to the guys earlier. It's like I need to nail down my brother to make it happen. So I would love to make that happen. So if you want to talk about it, we can do that. I'll give you my info. We could just.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay.
And definitely we want to extend the open invitation for you guys as we start getting into more challenging conversations coming up in the future here at both sides of the conversation. You guys are definitely invited. So just let us know, tap in, and make it happen. Rico, you got any last thoughts before we close this thing out, or anything you want to say?
Yeah, so my last thought is I just want to thank everyone out there for watching both sides of the conversation. Thank you, Okori, again for coming out. I know it's spare the moment, but you one of them active thinkers, so I know you always ready. You don't have to get ready. Same thing to you, Jay. James, I keep saying Jay. You feel like you my homie. Thank you so much for coming out. Supporting us, supporting both sides of the conversation. Everyone out there, thank you for supporting both sides of the conversation. Next week, we got some amazing stuff coming up, so be prepared to watch for that flyer that's coming out. Also, Tuesdays, watch our Hidden Gem segment where we highlight individuals in the community that's doing amazing work. Also, we support Black business only or a business of color. We want to support our people. We want to start generating back Black dollars and making sure Black dollars can stay in our community for, I know they say it's only for minutes. I'm trying to get it for an hour. Let's get it in our community for 1 hour. And then on Thursdays, we have Educational Thursdays where we give presentations on financial empowerment, tax preparedness. I mean, it's a host of things that we have available. So watch us on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then Sunday chat. Thanks everybody out there for watching. Corey, once again, thank you so much. There's so much that I'm taking away today. The main thing that I'm taking away from you both is consciousness, gaining consciousness and being spiritually aware of oneself. That's how we heal. That's how we move forward. That's how we gain empathy, compassion for one another. And I'm feeling kind of emotional because this is really, really real and it's true. And I feel the power of both of you brothers. You guys put something into the atmosphere where we all can really, really take a look at ourselves, because everything that we do, even through both sides of a conversation, it starts with self. So thank you so much for giving us the power of self to heal thyself, and to better understand ourselves. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody out there. If there's any burning desire, let that burning desire come out now.
Let me give a shout out to Black Business. I want to give a shout out to Coco Centric. It is a woman-owned jewelry line, handmade, curated jewelry, exceptional jewelry. If you guys, if any ladies are out there, any men out there interested in looking at some female jewelry, you can look online. There's a website called Coco Centric. That's COCOACENTRIC. Coco Centric.
And we also want to bring your wife on, your girl on to our show, Hidden Gems, and we definitely want to highlight her and her business. I got your email, so be looking out for an email from both sides of the conversation, because we definitely want her on. If she got a presentation or she got like some slides where she can kind of like show the jury off or whatever, we would love to have her on, so that way we can promote her. And if you know anybody else out there who has Black business, please, you can contact us at both sides of the conversation at gmail.com. Please hit us up to support Black business and brown businesses. Thank you so much. Y'all have an amazing weekend. Enjoy the rest of football. Go Raiders.
Rico, I'll let you know pretty soon. I'll be starting starting a private practice as a clinical social worker. So as soon as I get that started, I'll let you know.
So
Yeah.
definitely want to bring you in on some of the conversations that's happening with the city around mental health and healing our people. So I'll send you both the link so that you guys are at least in there, a part of the conversation as it relates to the defund the police, $120 million. We definitely need as many educated people, as many brothers on the call as possible to help steer those conversations. Y'all have an amazing weekend.
All right, bro.
Out.
All right, thank you. See you later.